Welcome to Legally Speaking with Case, where we dive deep into legal issues that shape our society. Today, we're tackling a subject that affects everyone, from individuals to businesses, journalists to public figures: defamation. What exactly is defamation under Indian law? How does it differ from slander and libel? And more importantly, where do we draw the line between protecting reputations and safeguarding free speech? Joining us today is Advocate Gaurav Ghosh, founder of DLC Law Chambers, who will break down the legal provisions, prosecution strategies, defenses, and landmark cases that have shaped defamation in India. We'll also explore the big questions. Are defamation laws misused? Should criminal defamation still exist? And how can individuals and businesses protect their reputation in the digital age? So, whether you're a journalist, a lawyer, a business owner, or just someone who wants to understand their rights and responsibilities, this episode is packed with insights you won't want to miss. So, Advocate Ghosh, my first question then to you would be, what exactly constitutes defamation under the Indian law?
There are two kinds of defamation under Indian law. It can be civil defamation as well as defamation, which is still a criminal act under even the new law. Defamation consists of a statement which is known to be false against somebody in order to lower their character or repute in the eyes of the general public. It includes two kinds, which I started with: libel and slander. Libel is the written form of defamation, whereas slander is the spoken form.
And what are the key legal provisions that govern defamation right now in India?
So civil defamation is tort law, which is the law of damages and individual harm.
Yeah.
And criminal defamation is currently governed by the BNS, Section 354.
And what, as a person, say, who has been defamed, what legal remedies do they have? What is the process to file a case in case of a defamation?
So in case of reputational harm, whether it is actual or whether it is perceived, if a statement has been made against somebody, then they can approach the civil court seeking damages, or they can file a criminal complaint for criminal defamation. And the penalty for criminal defamation is still 2 years of imprisonment with fine.
Okay. And how does this work with public figures, celebrities? Does the law say something about them, or do they have the same rights in case of defamation? Do they have different?
In case of public figures and celebrities who are considered people who are in the public domain, and as such, a broader leeway is provided to the public to make comments about them.
Right.
Okay. And it is not treated as personal defamation, and the courts have often ruled that public figures should have thicker skin than ordinary individuals. Apart from that, public figures also suffer defamation cases which target them for saying something or for making a statement, whether it is in their way of work or otherwise, because anything said by a person who holds a reputation in public or is a public figure is taken more seriously and gains more attention than something that a normal, ordinary person might say. So it works in both ways. It goes against public figures.
And how does defamation or defamation laws intersect with the right to speech in our country, or freedom?
The freedom of speech in our country is, fortunately or unfortunately, it is a qualified right. It is not an absolute right. So freedom of speech is subject to the integrity and sovereignty of the country, subject to public morality. It is also subject to defamation. So you have freedom of speech, but you cannot say anything that would jeopardize India's foreign relations with other countries, or you cannot say something that is absolutely against public morality. An example is what is going on with the Samay Raina and Ranveer Allabadia matter right now.
Yeah.
Without commenting on that. But as far as defamation is concerned, defamation is also an exception to the freedom of speech granted under Article 19. It is covered under one of the subsections of the article. And so you cannot knowingly say something against a person which you know is false and which you know is likely to damage their reputation.
And if this is a case for businesses, firstly, can a business file a defamation case? And if yes, then what are their legal remedies?
Businesses can, of course, file defamation cases. And the legal remedies would include the same remedies available to individuals, which is seeking damages or filing, in case of actual criminal intent. If they can establish it, then they can also file a criminal complaint.
And can a defendant claim protection if a statement was made in public interest or in good faith? Is there?
Yes, there are several exceptions to there are several common defenses, as we say, to criminal defamation, which include, broadly speaking, they include truth. You cannot be taken to court, you cannot be sued, or cannot be criminally penalized for saying something that is true. So, even though we don't yet have a formal whistleblowers protection law, but whistleblowing by and large would exclude someone from the scope of defamation laws.
Yeah, yeah.
Apart from that, there are other defenses, which is privilege, such as something said in parliament cannot be taken to court as being defamatory, even though it has been very recently. And there's privilege and truth, and there's a fair comment, and anything said for public good or public awareness or in innocence, where there is no malice. There are several defenses to defamation charges, whether civil or criminal.
And oftentimes, defamation laws are criticized for being misused by powerful people, to silence. Do you think that do you believe this to be true, or do you think that these are necessary laws we need to have?
Yes, it is true. And it is used not just by powerful people, it is also used by individuals against other individuals. If you want to silence somebody from saying something, if defamation laws are used very creatively, there is something called slap suit, which is a strategic lawsuit against public participation. Now, it might be filed by an individual to protect himself from reputational damage. It might be filed by a business. It might be filed by any institution.
Yeah. And
what was the second part of your question? Sorry, I missed.
I was asking that should such laws, do you think it's important to have defamation laws? Because, like in a lot of countries, defamation laws have been decriminalized. Defamation is not a crime in a lot of countries.
Yes, it has been decriminalized in a lot of countries, but at the same time, I think the law functions in a more efficient manner in these countries. Right. So if you sue someone for civil damages, then that is not just a vague threat in the air. It is actually likely to yield some results. So for those countries, that might be very suitable. But for us, we still, I think it is still all right to retain the criminal defamation law. Okay. Because oftentimes individuals cannot really sue for damages, because when you sue for heavy damages, you have to pay court fees to that tune.
Correct.
So it is easier for individuals to approach the court and claim that they have been defamed and that there was criminal intent behind that act. At the same time, of course, the law is misused. Any law which is there for good is always often enough misused, but there are public safeguards.
Right.
And courts appreciate all aspects of the law before giving an order.
So when it comes to, if you talk about someone, say, who has been accused of defaming another individual or a business, how do they tackle that, or what advice would you give to such people? What steps or measures should they take?
So defamation, the prosecution for defamation doesn't start with the court case or with the complaint before the magistrate for criminal defamation. It usually begins with a notice for defamation.
Right.
Now, if that notice is there and the individual being accused knows that they have made a defamatory statement, then the best thing to do is to withdraw that statement. Because often, even in big ticket litigation based on defamation, we have seen that it usually ends with an apology.
Yeah.
A public apology, either made before court or made to the public. So if you know that you have done something wrong, if you said something wrong about somebody, the best thing to do is take it back. And then that person is very likely to fail in a case for civil damages and certainly will not succeed in a criminal defamation suit. Right. On the other hand, if you're being taken to court for defamation where you have not said anything defamatory, or where you know that you have said the truth and there is no harm in what you have said, suppose you have done an expose on somebody as a journalist, then you need to stick to your guns. You need to reply to the defamation notice, and you have to obviously face trial and prove it in court.
Right.
As
And
far as criminal defamation is concerned, you can also apply to the court for quashing of the charges if no criminal case or intent or malice is made out.
okay. And how can a person establish then there was malice or intent in a defamation case? What do you need in such a case?
You need to prove that, first of all, that person knew whatever was being said was not true.
Right.
You need to prove that that person had something to gain from lowering your reputation.
Hmm.
You need to prove, or you can try to prove, that there was some previous rivalry. So the tests for intent and malice remain the same as in other criminal law.
Right. But would you say that these defamation related cases are pretty subjective because there's a lot of gray area in this aspect, or do you think it's pretty straightforward if everyone has their facts in place?
Can you please repeat the question?
Yeah,
There
yeah.
was some network error.
Yeah, no worries. No, I was asking, do you think, or in your experience, is defamation related cases tricky to handle because it's such a subjective area in itself? Or do you think it's like handling any other criminal or civil case?
There is nothing special to it apart from the nature of the allegation. And what is tricky is when you actually have to prove the amount of damages that have been claimed, or
Right.
the degree of reputational damage that you have alleged in your criminal complaint. When it comes to proof and evidence, then it becomes a little tricky. Otherwise, there's nothing very technical about them.
Right. Do you personally think there's anything that needs to change or updated in the current law in regards to defamation?
I think misuse of the law can be curtailed if courts are
Right.
stricter about it.
Okay.
Courts have been strict about misuse of several laws very recently, especially domestic violence and all of that. So if they also pass strict orders where they have seen in matters that no defamation was actually, no reputational harm was suffered, or there was no intent for criminal reputation, then they should pass strict orders against filing false complaints, and that should take care of it.
Do you also think ADRs is something that can be promoted here in such cases, so that these cases are not actually going to the courts? Or do you think mediation could be a good example?
In case of civil defamation, yes, of course, they
Yeah.
can refer it to mediation. But
Yeah.
usually, defamation laws are used in a very sort of adversarial situation. So parties are unlikely to agree for mediation.
Okay. But do you think it's a good idea, or in case of a civil defamation?
It is of course it is worth exploring.
Yeah.
In every case, mediation and alternate dispute resolution is worth exploring. But in defamation cases, it is unlikely because of the nature of the case.
And are there any landmark defamation cases in India which have significance?
There are landmark defamation cases. There is the not very old Subramaniam Swamy case, where it was challenged that that criminal defamation is unconstitutional.
Yeah.
And the court said that no, it is not unconstitutional. It is within the framework of the constitution. Then there was Ram Jethmalani's case, where high damages were awarded for defamation, lowering somebody's reputation. There is this recent case. I can't call it a landmark case, but there is this recent case where a legal edtech company took a couple of lawyers to court, and the Delhi High Court passed an order saying that for alleged defamation over social media, it has to be very explicit. The complainant or the petitioner has to come with clean hands. The entire conversation has to be shown to court. And also that, as something that we began with, that public personalities need to have thicker skin. And casual statements made on social media may not always constitute civil or criminal defamation. In fact, the court awarded costs against the petitioners in that case.
Right. I think that was all the questions that I had. Is there anything you would like to add in terms of defamation? Any closing thoughts?
I would just like to add talk about two cases that I recently dealt with.
Yeah.
One of them not so recent, This one was against a somewhat famous pulp fiction author who had said something about one of his characters, which was derogatory to begin with, and he had linked this character to a real world place and real life people who lived in that place,
Mm.
and he had been taken to court very promptly. Now, this author person, in the beginning, he claimed he sent a reply to the notice. When we took him to court, he also filed replies, and he claimed something called suspension of disbelief, which is used in fiction,
Yeah.
where you give real world examples to make the reader believe that whatever is there in the story is true. But his defense did not really work. It fell flat. And ultimately, he had to settle with an apology. What we really learned from this case was that ordinary people can also take bigger people or public
Yeah.
personalities to court and succeed. And another recent case which I dealt with, it was against an employee who was a teacher at a school.
Mm.
And in order to enforce the terms of their employment contract, which said that she could not leave before a certain period of time and all of that, this institution actually sued her for criminal defamation based on what she had said on social media.
Okay.
And the case was in a faraway place where the institution was. This lady was from somewhere else. So when we placed a transfer petition before the Supreme Court, we succeeded in that. And we showed to the court that there is prima facie no criminal intent or malice behind the statements that have been made. And the Supreme Court sided with our client.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing these very interesting cases. And I think we can end today's discussion with that. I mean, it was very eye-opening. I learned new things. I'm sure our listeners also learned new things about defamation. Thank you so much for joining us again, Advocate
Thank you.
Ghosh. And I think we explored what constitutes defamation, the legal framework, how one can file a defamation or defend it. And we also dived into the complexities of free speech, public interest, and the misuse of defamation laws. One thing is clear: while defamation laws serve to protect reputations, they must not be weaponized to suppress dissent, criticism, or truth. Balancing individual dignity and free expression remains a challenge, and perhaps it's time for a broader legal conversation on legal reforms. If you find this discussion insightful, share this episode and leave us a review and let us know your thoughts. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered, and always know your rights. Thank you for tuning in to Legally Speaking with Rest the Case. Thank you so much.